بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا Muhammad. And by the will of Allah, we'll continue with our next question here, following up on the Abrahamic prophetic legacy. And our next question is: what were the main differences in the challenges faced by the prophets of Bani Israel compared to earlier prophets?
Yeah, so this is really very interesting. When you read the Quran about the stories of the previous prophets, the previous prophets would give would give the message, other than Prophet Ibrahim, would give the message and would give the message and would argue and fight with their people, not fight, but argumentatively fight, to clarify things for them about the worship of only Allah. And what we see is their continuous process doing this. They come out with a few people, a few individuals that work with them, and the rest don't believe. They don't go along. They still stay mushrikeen. And what happens is after some time, Allah gives that prophet the news that Allah will destroy these people, and that prophet would leave with the believers that are with him, and usually these were the poorer people, and that's one of the reasons the others didn't want to come with him. He says, "You've got only the poor people. We want some of the rich people like us." And anyway, so there's only a few people that would leave with the prophet, and Allah would destroy that civilization completely. And we see that over and over and over again before Sayyidina Ibrahim, that this happened all the time. But in the lineage of Sayyidina Musa and later, what we see is that the families or the lineage of Sayyidina of Sayyidina Ishaq, sorry, Sayyidina Yaqub, who is Israel. By the way, Israel, Sayyidina Yaqub is Israel, and Israel actually, if we break it down from the ancient roots of the word, it means Abdullah. So it's the same thing as when we call our children Abdullah. It's the same thing. Israel is the same kind of name. It means the same kind of thing. So when we see in that lineage of those tribes, is that there's a mix in the belief. There's some who are steadfast on the belief, and some who are playing with the belief, right? They say we believe, but they're not really quite believing, and they play with the belief. In other words, what happens when Sayyidina Musa comes with things, he says, we're only worshiping Allah. And so immediately after he takes them out of Egypt, they come by around the people who are worshiping, have some idol they're worshiping. So immediately they tell him, give us an idol to worship just like they have an idol. He said, "Subhanallah, did you not witness the splitting of the sea in front of you? And you come and ask an idol again?" The question becomes it's a game with this faith. I want the old traditions, at the same time I want this tawheed. And we see the story of the Ijl, the golden cow, and of course that still survives with us today. That holy cow kind of thing, still from that story. But what we see continually in the lineage of Bani Israel is that this duality of that some are very much believers and they take it to heart very much, and it's usually in many cases it was the uneducated people, and then we see those that are scholars that could, and some of them have changed the Torah and rewritten the Torah, and then Allah would reveal the Torah again and again and again with these prophets, and they would constantly pull it aside, do things to it to give them favor, to give them wealth, to give them something different than the rest of the people. And what happens is that there's no continuity of that faith in a solid way. But Allah gives these prophets the message over and over and over again, allowing the people of Bani Israel to have a chance to come back to Allah. And it's a very interesting thing that this continues because several of them are, or a large portion of them are playing this game and not really becoming monotheistic all the way. And then there's others who stay on the path, who stay on the real Torah, try to stay with it. And Allah keeps giving that Torah over and over again, trying to keep them and bring them back to the monotheistic faith. And they still don't always maintain it the right way, which is a different thing compared to the prophets before that. Before the prophets before that, Allah would just wipe them out and bring others in. SubhanAllah, those that remained on the faith, of course, are the lineage that we see today in the Middle East, in Palestine, in the Levant, is those remnants of those believers from the Jewish faith who eventually became Muslim when they heard the Prophet Muhammad's message. They approached it and took it in. And they said, this is similar to what we have in the Torah, and this is what we need to be doing. This is where we need to be going with this. And it's those few that were really believers that made the difference in keeping that whole tribe alive, keeping that whole system alive, because all the others were just not, they were playing. They were not really monotheistic. It's very different than the older ones. The older ones, they'll just go away, right? Allah would just take them away completely. But Allah gave us this as a test, right? Because now that tests all of humanity. Where are you going to go?
And how did the Prophet Musa alayhi salam and the Prophet Isa alayhi salam prepare the way for the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam?
So a couple of things here, and this is a very interesting story. We only have about 5 minutes, right? So this is a very interesting story. So let's start with how did they prepare? Of course, they prepared by telling people that there is another prophet coming at the end of time, that he is the prophet they had his description in the Torah and in Injil, and they would talk about him and tell people about him, that when he comes you should be following him, and he's the right person to be followed. They told their people this. They had this in their Torah, and they had this in the Injil. In the Torah, what we know about the Torah, and the Quran mentions this a couple of times, is that they rewrite the Torah with their own hands. Now, recognize, of course, that the scrolls of the ancient times were not very well preserved, and so when a scroll becomes old, they would have to rescribe it by their own hands into another scroll, and this is where things could change, right? In the process of transcription, a piece of the old scroll may have been torn or something, so they add the words as they thought they were, or something. So this was one element. But anyway, the Torah told them about the Prophet Muhammad, and the prophets told them about Prophet Muhammad coming. Same thing with the Sayyidina Isa. But of course, as we know, with the Injil, is we don't have the Injil anymore. The Torah at least still exists, at least till the time of the Prophet ﷺ still existed, that we had something with it. But with the Injil, of course, it was lost because we don't have a written form of the Injil that Sayyidina Isa showed us or told us about. But in that Injil, of course, what survives from the pieces of the Bible today, even till there is an indication that they had said that the Prophet Muhammad will be coming, and in the Quran, and in that, of course, the Quran tells us in the Injil he is named Ahmad, and they have that. And I've seen videos online of people talking about that, going through the current Bibles and showing us what this is. In my view, and this is my view from my conclusions, what I see is that the Bible and the Injil are not the same thing, right? The Injil, of course, is the word of Allah as it came to Sayyidina Isa in Aramaic. The Bible today is the earliest copies of the Bible today are in Greek, written copies are in Greek. And then, of course, we know they had their quote unquote scholars add to it. And then there is the church that modifies it and so on. So there's very little that remains from the original Injil in there. And when we talk to Christian people, Christians who are really dedicated, they will tell you there's very few of Jesus's words in the Bible today, and they highlight them in red. And there's very little of that in what we have. So even the seerah of Jesus is halfway captured in the Injil, in today's Bible. And it's not, and of course, there's a mix up between the Injil that Allah revealed and the sayings of Jesus and the scholars, and they mix them all together in one book. But what I wanted to get to here is there is something very beautiful about Jesus that tells us of the advent of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What we find about Sayyidina Isa is that Allah created him without a father. And in that creation, Allah mentions in the Quran that inna mathala Isa inda Allah kamathali Adam. That the example of Isa in the Quran is the same as the example of Adam. Adam was created without a father. The mother, Isa, was created without a father. That connection that Allah makes from the time of Adam, the first human being that the angels bowed to Sayyidina Isa, who was created without a father, Allah ties that whole time period together and gives you an indication. Now, everybody knows, everybody knows that Sayyidina Isa is created without a father. Everybody knows, right? It's so well documented in history. It's a very clean, demarked line in history that Sayyidina Isa is born without father. Tying that with Sayyidina Adam tells us this is an era that is concluded. This is an era that is finished. And look at the history from Sayyidina Musa to Sayyidina Isa, continuity of prophets, one after the other, after the other, after the other. Quran tells us this. They're continuous prophets. Some of the prophets they kill, some they isolate, some they don't believe, and Allah keeps sending the prophets, and they keep arguing about why is this a prophet? He's not as rich as we are. Why is this one? Why is this one? Why is this one? And we get all of this, a continuity of prophets, until the prophethood was just something. Yeah, it was just something interesting. It wasn't something to be taken seriously. And what we see is that when Allah creates Sayyidina Isa without a father and ties that to Sayyidina Adam, he's telling us this era is completely over. This is a clear line in history. No more prophets. No more prophets. What happens by this is the fact that Sayyidina Isa and Sayyidina Musa are predicting the coming of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is dua of Sayyidina Ibrahim. Allah is clearing the way completely for 500 to 500 something years with no prophets. And everyone, all the scholars from those beliefs, from the Torah and from the Injil, all of these scholars are awaiting that man, are awaiting for him, because they know there's no other prophets. There's no mix-up. There's no, oh, maybe this is the one, maybe this is, there's no mix-up at all. There's no prophets until the Prophet Muhammad appears, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is exactly, again, now tie this back to Sayyidina Adam, when Allah tells the angels that I'm going to create this human being. This in itself is an honor, the tashrif for humanity, that Allah is telling the angels, announcing, when somebody is important, you announce them before they come, right? So Allah is announcing Sayyidina Adam, and Allah is announcing Sayyidina Muhammad the same way, by making the end of the lineage of the prophethood very, very clear and demarked in history through the birth of Jesus without a father. That becomes a very clear demarked line in history that people don't go over. They understand that very well. And then the Prophet Muhammad, 500 years later, comes as the prophet, and everybody's waiting for him. Everybody's waiting for him. So that announcement, and that 500-year announcement of the Prophet ﷺ, becomes something of somebody, we are waiting for this person, and we want to know what this person says. So when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ finally got the revelation at age 40, it was something very big and very clear in front of people. And it was and with that, Allah honored the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in a very high way, in a very beautiful way. And he comes from that lineage, that beautiful lineage of Sayyidina Ibrahim through Sayyidina Ismail's side of the chain. But it's just a beautiful way that Allah makes us, for those of us who contemplate, who think, he gives us a very beautiful way to introduce this Prophet ﷺ and tell us about him through that miracle birth of Sayyidina Isa.
That's a beautiful way to end this segment, and we're up on our time. So we're going to go ahead and end the session and take any questions from the audience.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to our channel and hit the like video and share it with friends and family. Thank you.